We have a program, inshallah, and we have a beautiful next session, which is a panel discussion. Now, Sheikh Husam will join us for our next session, which is the panel discussion, and the topic is effects of Western creed on the Muslim mind. And for this panel discussion, we will also have joined with us Brother Abdullah Al-Andalusi and Sheikh Abdul Aziz Rasul. Brother Abdullah is an international speaker, thinker, and intellectual activist for Islam and Muslim affairs. His work involves explaining and demonstrating by rational arguments the intellectual proofs for the Islamic belief system and promoting the Islamic way of life and Islamic solutions for contemporary problems. He has spoken in community centers, universities, colleges, and numerous appearances on various programs on TV channels, including the BBC, ITV, BBC, Arabic, Al Jazeera, and many more. He engages in debates on topics from theology to political philosophy, and you can check out his website at thedebateinitiative.com. And also we have with us Sheikh Abdul Aziz Rasul, who, mashallah, he was my principal in Isna High School. He's currently the principal there, and he's completed his hifz over 14 years ago with his teacher, his father, Sheikh Sabghatullah Rasul. And he is also an instructor here at I3 Institute. So without further ado, let us please welcome Sheikh Abdul Aziz and Brother Abdullah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So inshallah, we wanted to not just have lectures, we wanted also to have discussions. And there's a lot of echo, mashallah. We have a few panelists here to discuss a few questions on the topic of how Western creed affects the Muslim mind. Now, you guys, we want to be interactive. You can ask questions directly, or even easier, I'm going to give you a website. Very easy, all right? Take this down. Take out your phones. Take out your phones right now. Put it on your browser. Menti.com. Okay, M-E-N-T-I, Menti.com. M-E-N-T-I.com. And you'll be asked for a code. The code is 411699. 411699. Okay? So there you can, inshallah, type a question as we go along, and I'll get the questions, and I can ask the questions to anyone here, and we'll go from there, inshallah. So menti.com, and the code is 411699. طيب. Western creed. Alhamdulillah, we have Sheikh Abdul Andalusi here with us. Brother Abdul Andalusi. Sorry, he doesn't like to be called Sheikh, but mashallah, may Allah bless his knowledge and his da'wah efforts. First, what is Western creed? And is it one creed? Is like we have La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Is there a fundamental Western creed, or are there multiples of it? Fadal.
كريم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين والصحبه الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My esteemed brothers and sisters, shuyukh, elders, and some guests we have who are also here to share with us this discussion. So, the Western civilization, first and foremost, before I discuss that, many Muslims ask, look, we have the Quran, we have the Sunnah. Why do we need to concern ourselves with other civilizations or other beliefs or philosophies? Should we just not stick to what the Rasulullah ﷺ taught us and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to us? But here's the thing, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spends a lot of ayat of Quran telling us about other civilizations and beliefs. Talks about what the Christians believe, what Jews believe, what the ancient Egyptians believed. It talks about the Romans, talks about many different peoples around that were in the Middle East and were known to the Muslims. So clearly the creator of the entire universe saw fit to see that Muslims understood the beliefs of other people around the world, how they strayed, why they strayed from the initial revelation that was given to all mankind. In order for what reason? One, so that you can speak to them and you can invite them back to the deen of the fitrah, the religion of man's nature, that we were intended to be. And two, that you avoid their mistakes. Right? Surah Fatiha contains within it, in a way, it's a form of style, like a dua for us to avoid those who went astray and made those mistakes, our predecessors in Abrahamic religion. But if you don't know what mistakes they made, how can you avoid it? So, to those who think that the Quran and Sunnah is sufficient, yes it is, because the Quran and Sunnah is telling you to go and study and see what they say. Right? The Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam even had a famous debate with Christians from Najran discussing their creed, and ayahs of the Quran came down to give responses to some of the Christian arguments that they were making. So, now Western civilization, to answer that very briefly. The West just refers to a particular civilization, which, if I was going to define it, refers to those in Europe who were upon the tradition of the Roman Catholic Church. Everyone to the east of that, the Slavic countries, Russia, Eastern Orthodox Church, they're not considered to be the Western civilization, and they're not considered to be one group. Western civilization can have many different creeds, but to be Western, it has to emanate from their intellectual history and tradition. So Protestant Christianity comes from, obviously, was a diversion from, let's say, Catholic Roman Christianity, and that is part of Western civilization. But it's like asking, to make it more clearer, it's like saying Persian civilization, right? What religion or what way of life or aqidah is Persian civilization? Well, it depends what the Persians are following at any particular point in time. But what we mean by Western is we mean any idea that emanates from the intellectual traditions of that geographical location in the world, which is Western Europe, and the peoples within Western Europe that were upon originally the Western Roman Church or the Catholic Church, not to be confused with Eastern Orthodox Church. So that's Western civilization in a nutshell, and that's what we mean by Western.
جزاكم الله خير بارك الله فيكم. طيب, so we'll continue inshallah. I'm going to have a quick question to Sheikh Hussam. So Brother Abdullah just defined what Western creeds are. From an Islamic perspective, I'm going to focus on the Islamic stuff for Sheikh Hussam. What does the Quran and Sunnah say about basically accepting other ideas from different civilizations? The creedal one, the doctrinal one, basically, to make it easier, I guess.
طيب, بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. I'm going to try to keep it very concise and very brief. Number one, like Brother Al-Andalusi was mentioning, you have to contextualize the origin of the ideas and the words. طيب? But simply put, when it comes to beliefs, we believe as Muslims that Allah has told us, اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. That today I have completed your deen for you. I have completed your mandate, your constitution, your way of life, your value system. I've completed it for you. And I have also completed and bestowed my favor upon you and accepted Islam as your way of life. Accepted Islam as your way of life.
Let's be very direct. Is it yes or no?
So
I'm going to have this more of a conversation.
If you have a complete way of life, when it comes to creed, you do not need other creeds, of course.
But we don't need it. But what's if a person wants to do it? Like, what's, like, you know, for fun?
For fun?
Yeah, I want to ask the question that everybody would ask.
Yeah, for fun. I don't know if...
Like believing stuff for fun, for example.
Yeah, of course. Look, when it comes to belief, like creed, like serious creed in your life, that's not an area of, like, to laugh at. That's a serious matter. It's a serious matter. That's upon that we're talking about salvation. We're talking about Jannah, paradise, or hellfire. It's not an easy, light thing that you can just, I'm going to believe this on the side and believe that on the side. Your beliefs, for the most part, have to be consistent, internally and externally consistent. They have to be consistent among themselves, among itself as a belief system, and also it has to be consistent within reality. So I don't think someone can take that lightly and say, I'm just going to believe in this as a joke. However, we have to make it clear. We're talking about creed. We're talking about creed. And there could be parts of that creed. There could be parts of that creed which are fundamentally like in sync within Islam. And it makes sense. Like, for example, many examples, right? And remember, Western creed, when it was being established, a lot of enlightenment was what? Was motivated, if not catalyzed, by Muslim thought. So to believe that, okay, I'm going to believe in Islam as a whole and as this system of living, that is not always completely at odds with the West as a whole. So let's not, put those as two dichotomies. There's a lot of intersectionalities and a lot of, similarities. But as a belief system as a whole, of course, we have to embrace Islam completely. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أُدْخُلُوا فِي السِّلْمِ كَافَّةً. Enter Islam fully, full-heartedly.
Allah barak feekum. Sheikh Rasul, what do you think? You want to ask a question right here to the brother right here?
Yeah, so, and also there are some questions that are good that I'm getting here, but they have nothing to do with the topic, so we're going to leave those for later. Like about Allah talking
You're getting too busy,
to
Sheikh, with the
Musa
questions,
Yeah, man, it's entertaining, mashallah. So here's a good question. Are all Western ideologies inherently negative?
Okay.
To myself, okay. Are all Western ideologies inherently negative? I think when we hear about creed or beliefs, we get very confused because people say, are we meant to reject physics or chemistry or mathematics or sociology, which gets a bit more trickier, or psychology, what you study in the Western universities? What do we accept? What do we reject? How does it work? Well, I'll give you a very simple set of criteria. If it's about the world, so it's the things that exist in this universe based on observation, that is observed facts, you can accept it. If there's obviously an isnad for it, as in an experiment or someone observed it, or it's mutawatir, it's in all the chemistry and physics books, which has been observed. Mathematics, again, it's just being consistent with quantity and relations of quantities. Again, we can accept that, right? And in fact, we actually advance a lot of that studies. Sometimes people refer it to as madaniya from the Arabic, pertaining to the city, because those outside the city were viewed as unsophisticated nomads, and those in the city, they made the technological products. They had time to study astronomy and mathematics and so on, so madaniya as it's called. But more simply for you, anything that concerns value of things, good or bad, should or shouldn't, which is connected to the purpose of human life. So what should you do and what shouldn't you do? Like, should I leave my phone on during this lecture? Or should I turn it off? These things are connected to aqidah and viewpoint to life. So when it's concerning what you should and shouldn't do and good, judgment of good and bad, this can only come from the Quran and Sunnah. Right? Very simple. Should, shouldn't, good or bad, only from the Quran and Sunnah. Everything else, concerning the material objects that exist, then of course you can accept it from wherever it comes from. So I think that'll be a brief response to that.
I'm going to try to maybe take a question from the audience before we continue here. Anybody wants to ask a question quickly? Raise your hand, please. Anybody has a question? Nobody has a question. Okay, go ahead. Tfadal. Question, not a comment.
I have to say brother Abdullah.
Okay, so quickly, a quick recap of the question. The brother was saying sometimes in Western academia, certain things are claimed to be observable, but they're not really observable, like the evolution of the macro species. So how do we, what would you say about that in terms of accepting observable facts there?
If you allow me just to say a word quickly. So Umar, may Allah bless you and give you Jannat Firdaus, and ease your journey to attaining the education that you're pursuing. There's a difference between a theoretical framework and an observation. Observations, things that you can see with your eyes, things that are testable, things that are empirically observed. Those no two people can, deny. I saw, I heard, I felt, I experimented. X plus Y led to Z. Those things we all, as a universal community, as a global community, can agree about. However, the frameworks of interpretation through which we take those observations and make sense of them and add meaning to them, and through which we interpret other observations. So we accept that this is going to be a theoretical framework that we're going to adopt, and that theoretical framework is going to be basically the foundation upon which we make other interpretations of other observations. So we have to make a separate distinction between the two. But be careful with the whole micro-macro evolution. We don't want to get into terminology which, you know, shows lack of familiarity completely with evolution as a large picture. We can put that aside for now and just focus on the fact that theory and theoretical frameworks are different from observations.
Okay. I would concur with the esteemed Sheikh. Basically, you have two types of things that you will be taught in life. Things about reports of things that have been observed. So either you observe it or you hear reports of things that are observed. And it's always good to check a report. And in science, they like to do, or the scientific method, they like to do experiments where, okay, now observe it for yourself is the best way. And everything else is theory. Theory is just an explanation of what you can't see. You could call it speculation of the ghaib, for want of a better term, but not the ghaib in the theological sense that we mean in Islam, but in the Arabic literal sense, what you can't see, basically, what is hidden from you in essence. So everything else is theory. So we can see that on a microbiotic level, you know, bacteria change and mutate, your cells can change and mutate, your immune system tries to knock them out, the ones that mutate from your DNA to prevent them from being what we call cancer. We can observe these things and we accept what is observed. It's not a problem. But then when people say, right, now we've seen this observation, that means that 3 million years ago, humans came from a particular pre-hominid species or what have you. Now, that's an assumption because you haven't seen it. Okay? No doubt, I'm probably some maybe a Roman or an ancient Israelite found the bird that Isa alayhi salam made into a clay, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the bird alive. Does anyone know that story? That Isa alayhi salam, he made a bird out of clay, and then God made it come alive, an actual bird. Maybe that bird flew off somewhere, and someone discovered it and said, yes, this is a nice bird, maybe. I wonder what its parents look like, assuming it had parents. But of course, it didn't, right? And they've made the assumption because they've seen all the birds seem to have, parent birds, right? So my point is this, is that there's what you observe, and everything else is theory. Now, the point of theory is to speculate an explanation for what you can see. That's what theory means. Any kind of theory, that's what it means. So don't get the two confused when people discuss it. The whole evolution discussion is actually a very big discussion. I've written some articles about it. I'm actually going to do a conference in London in about a month's time about it. But many people have discussed that issue. So I'm happy to discuss that more, but time is short in this panel, so we'll move on to the next question, inshallah.
Time, inshallah, we're going to be breaking in 1 minute for the adhan, and then we'll pray. The iqamah will be at 8:50, inshallah. One quick question.
No, we should break now, inshallah. It's 8:45.
I'm going to answer one question here very quickly. It's a quick question.
Okay.
Can sisters come downstairs after Isha? Inshallah, we'll try to make the arrangements. As long as we have enough space, we'll see the space issue. We'll speak to management and see if we can have the sisters join us in the back. Barakallahu feekum. We can start the adhan, inshallah. Tayyib, so let's, I know we're all getting excited now. Now we're getting to the beef of it, all right? Or the chicken, whichever you like. So, question here, Islam is perfect. We know, read the ayah, اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي رضيت لكم الإسلام دينا.
Translation, please.
Today I have perfected the deen for you. I have completed my favor upon you, and I'm pleased with Islam, and I have accepted Islam for you as a way of life. Muslims, we know this, we're taught this. How are we still being affected? What are the means or mediums or mechanisms that Muslims are being affected? And is it only Muslims in the West? Or is it Muslims also in the East?
Sheikh, just one question, not three questions.
Yeah, I'm just getting it hyped up. I'm hyped
So
up.
the
You hyped
effects-
me up,
I
Sheikh.
know, brother. MashaAllah.
Yes,
Right, the effects of Western civilization. Each one, mashallah, can have a quick. Who wants to start first? Sheikh first, yalla.
تفضل.
They're gonna fight. They're gonna fight now.
There's no time. There's no time for polite Canada today, so we'll just get straight into it, inshallah. Why are we affected by Western thought if we have and we believe that we have a perfect way of life, a perfect value system, and a perfect way of assessing reality and understanding reality? Well, a few reasons. Number one, we live in a time that is basically, now we're in a post-colonialist time. So there was intentional and unintentional projects designed to basically, colonialize. And we are now dealing with intellectual colonialism. Maybe our countries are no longer in the East, if we use that term loosely.
Sheikh, maybe if I may interrupt, like, what makes it appealing? Maybe this is the better question. What makes the Western culture appealing to the Muslims, even though we have a perfect religion?
طيب. There's a lot of okay. One thing at a time. طيب, Bismillah. Let's just stay focused. There is an intellectual crisis in the Muslim community. Our shuyukh could do better in terms of engaging in discussing and having these conversations. There's no way to deny that. Our countries themselves are being impacted by post-colonialist rhetoric, and that's definitely contributing. But what makes, subhanallah, these parts of Western thought very appealing is the focus on individualism, is the focus on the idea that you can do whatever you want, is the focus on the idea that everything is subjective. There are no, objective truths that you can basically, or some, it all depends on how you look at it. So the idea of putting the individual at the center, where you can derive your own beliefs, your values, right and wrong, that's very appealing to many Muslims, whether subconsciously or, unconsciously. So there's a big, subhanallah, ball of ideas that you have to unwind.
Very good, mashallah, very good. Okay, next.
Western ideas seem appealing because of two basic points. Firstly, the countries that comprise the West seem to be militarily and economically, currently for the time being, the strongest in the world, and of course, might makes right for most people's nafs. Right? Not akal. It doesn't make rational sense. Just because a country is powerful means it's right. It doesn't make it right. But when people see it being powerful, their heart's kind of inclined to it. Like they must be doing something correct or right, or maybe God is honoring a certain civilization with great power because they're doing something, or He's giving them some blessing. We like to assume that Allah's intention behind things, which is a bit of a problem there. Because, China's rising up and they're, atheist communists. So what blessings are they being given? Are they, have they perfected their salah? As some Muslims think are the key to revival? Well, no, don't really think so. So, in essence, there's that. So they think it's currently the superior civilization. And so they think, okay, and what made them the superior civilization? They're currently liberal, so maybe liberalism is the key to their power, even though liberalism really only came about in the 1800s, its kind of current form. And the scientific and industrial revolution started before liberalism. I mean, the West changed for about 600 years, technologically changed, before any secular or liberal countries came about within the West. But we assume, it's because of their following liberalism. Or next, maybe in 50 years, our kids or their kids' will think that the Western civilization is superior because they have gay rights. Like, they reach their technological superiority because of gay rights. They'll think that. That's how silly it is to assume that liberalism was connected to Western technological superiority. So I suppose there's that. Just quickly, someone made... all the different brothers talked about different ideas that came to their mind when they thought about Western civilization. Atheism predates the West, ancient Greeks and many others, including Bedouin Arabs. Usually those, in the ancient and medieval times, it was usually associated with people who were generally ignorant and uncivilized. The barbarians didn't really have a religion. Only the civilized nations of the world actually, the Babylonians and the people from Mesopotamia, they're the ones that had religion. Everyone else, the barbarians, didn't have any religion. So as atheism was associated with people who were unsophisticated back in the day. You only live once, you also only die once. So for those who want to do extreme sports or what have you, be careful because you can also die. It's a silly kind of justification for following whatever your desires want until you get into trouble for it, like contracting STDs or overdose of drugs or a whole number of other problems, or being arrested by the police, a whole number of things. Skepticism, again, was the West didn't invent it. Actually, it was the ancient Greeks. They discovered it, rediscovered it from the ancient Greeks. Liberalism is a Western product. Feminism is just liberalism applied to women, because when the guys in the West discovered liberalism and said that'd be great for men with property, and then the women said, well, what about us as well? So that's really what feminism is. Freedom is a funny one. It reminded me of a 17th century sheikh who was kind of looking at Western culture and civilization, and they were talking about 18th century, and they were talking about how they were kind of being free in the West, and he thought, oh, were you slaves before? Right? He didn't understand when the West used that concept. Freedom just means in the ancient world that you're the opposite of being a slave to someone else. That's about it. LGBT is a different discussion, maybe. Yeah, and communism, of course, is a Western product.
I'll grab that one. All right. See, I couldn't interject because I don't have the mic. So, Sheikh Rasul, help me out for God's sakes.
That's why he's beside you, man.
let me now summarize quickly. So the 2 points, mashallah, each speaker brought 1 point. What was the point that Sheikh Hussam just brought? Why is the Western ideas appealing? Then it's focused on the individual, right? The desires, you. And Sheikh and brother Abdullah, what was the first point? What was the point? He lost you, I know. What was the first point? Come on, people, sisters, no, he didn't say enough. No. What is it? Yeah, the appeal of success and power, right? So Western civilization seems, to be superior from a technological perspective, military perspective, economic perspective. So people always look up to the winners. Okay, may Allah bless you guys. Barakallah feekum. Jazakumullah khair. Sheikh,
Can I share something?
please
Thank you.
go ahead.
So, subhanAllah, whenever I visit back home, and for me it's Iraq, and you can have whatever back home is, they're really excited to have somebody from the West, right? Oh my God, you speak English? Can you speak English to us? And they're really excited, right? So this notion that, oh, you're coming from the West, or you're really, not just educated, but you're like, oh man, you're it, right? People, oh, I want to move to the West. I want to live there. There is where it's great and awesome and all this stuff. So definitely we can relate to this stuff. One more. Allah tells us about Bani Israel in the Quran, and tells us they had this inferiority complex. And so when Musa and Bani Israel were saved, Allah tells us, وَجَاوَزْنَا بِبَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ الْبَحْرَ فَأَتَوْا عَلَى قَوْمٍ يَعْكُفُونَ عَلَى أَصْنَامٍ لَهُمْ. When Allah saved Bani Israel, they were the slaves, they were persecuted for so long, and Allah saved them. They saw all the miracles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were muwahidun, they believed in Allah, they worshipped Allah, their prophet is there with them. All these miracles are happening, Fir'aun is defeated. And they see people bowing, worshipping idols. And they say to Musa, give us an object to worship, just like these guys have an object to worship. Why would they do that? It's inferiority. It's looking at others. It's imitating. It's copying. It's seeing something, greater. So we got to be careful of that and not fall into the pitfalls
I gotta
of
be
Bani
careful giving you the
Israel,
mic.
which is my workshop tomorrow, inshallah.
May Allah bless you. So go to his workshop. He's just doing some advertisement. You're using you're
of
abusing
course.
your mic, your MC status, brother.
Alhamdulillah.
Sheikh, all right.
طيب.
طيب. I'm going to give you now a question, just 1 point. And since you really, really want to answer, I'll also include you in the question. Can each one of you three, inshallah, the mashayikh and brother Abdullah here, give us one thing, just one thing, 1 minute each, that helps us fortify our minds from foreign ideas to Islam?
Okay, I'll start. Quickly.
What? You just spoke, brother. Give
Yo,
Shaykh
man.
Osama a break, man.
Because it's in the same ayah I quoted.
طيب, go ahead.
You said one thing.
No problem.
Musa's reply to Bani Israel: إن هؤلاء متبر ما هم فيه وباطل ما كانوا يعملون قال أغير الله أبغيكم إلها وهو فضلكم على العالمين. This is his response to his people when they told him, we want this. First he said, إنكم قوم تجهلون. You guys are ignorant for saying this, for wanting something inferior than what I have for you. He says, what these people are doing is a source of destruction for them. It is mutabbar, it's destroyed. So don't follow this stuff. It's a ruins. It will ruin you in the dunya and akhirah. And he says, would I want another God for you other than Allah? You have your deen and He has chosen you. فَضَّلَكُمْ عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ He has, giving you the status and the deen above all others. Go back to the Quran, fortify your mind with the Quran, and go back to what Allah has given you.
Allah barak fikum. Next, who wants to go next? Sheikh Husam or Brother Abdullah? Brother Abdullah?
The Sheikh always. In Islam, we're meant to compete with each other in good, and because the Canadians are known for being polite, I'm trying to out-polite the Canadians to compete, right? To compete in the good. So you want one point on...
Just one way, basically. I want these brothers and sisters here to take something with them to go back home. How do they basically protect themselves, vaccinate themselves, fortify their minds from foreign ideas? Just one thing.
Just one thing. Look out for the assumptions. Everything you'll be taught. Sometimes a lot of what you think you know about Islam was actually your assumption or the assumption of those that taught it to you. I remember when I first was learning about Islam, and some very enthusiastic brothers were saying to me that the Quran has been perfectly preserved, true, and every single letter is in its exact place when it was first written. It's like, well, when Arabic, as you know, was not a standardized language, there was no dictionaries that the pagan Arabs, before the time that Islam came, could pick up to standardized Arabic. There was at least 7 major dialects in the Arabian Peninsula. So how do you spell any word in Arabic? Well, it actually was the Quran that helped standardize the Arabic language, and when the Quran was being written down, you had different spelling conventions, producing the same word and the same sounds, but different spelling conventions. So while I appreciate the brother's enthusiasm to say that not a single word in the Quran has been changed, there was ikhtilaf as to what was the best way to spell a pre-existing word that had no spelling, no standardized way of spelling it beforehand, right? So the brother made an assumption. And many of the mistakes and the shubahat, the doubts that you will have about Islam, not many, all of them will come from an assumption you've made about Islam or an assumption you've made about those ideas taught you. People will tell you, oh, we've scientifically proved that that we can bring the dead back to life according to science. So there you go, your religion is somehow negated. It's like, well, no, what do you mean by that? Well, we took a cell, we took out the nucleus, it was a dead cell, and then we put a new nucleus into it, and now it's a living cell. We brought the dead back to life. It's like, well, what's the definition of dead? It's just an empty cell. You took out the nucleus, you put a new nucleus into it, from pre-existing life, by the way, and it just continued functioning like it was doing before. So you didn't really bring a dead body or dead creature back to life. You just took a pre-existing cell and you replaced the nucleus. As the Americans say, was it big whoop, right? Yeah. See, the assumption and how they twist what they tell you. They say, we've brought the dead back to life. Here's the proof. Wait a second. No, if they were to relate it to you factually, they would say, we took an old nucleus, we took a cell, we took the nucleus out, we put it back in. That would have been the factual description of what happened. But like newspaper headlines, if you believe them literally, without questioning, you will have shubahat. So all shubahat is related to assumptions that you've made.
So Sheikh Husam, inshallah.
Keeping it very brief, a
Bless you.
community that does not know its history and its past is doomed to repeating the mistakes of the past. So I think it begins with education. First command given to the Prophet Muhammad sallam, اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. Read in the name of your Lord who created. So you read with the intention of discovery. You read, again, challenging assumptions. You read seeking intellectual humility. So re-embracing this notion of reading, exploration, research, going back into our history. We're standing on the shoulders of giants, rediscovering our tradition. rediscovering. Remember, Muslims did not encounter Western civilization in 1900s or 1800s or 1700s. Muslims encountered, different communities way back in the past, and they had to do what we're doing now. They had to reconcile, make sense of differences, choose and accept and reject, and they had to do that. They had to filter out those, other thoughts. So we have in our own history, the conditions and the experience in the past that can basically guide our discussion in this modern context. So being critical, knowing your history, and educating yourself as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to do so.
Allah barak fikum. So inshallah, mashallah, education, I would say, summarizes your educate yourself. Shaykh Rasul's point is get to know the batil, and Brother Abdullah inshallah is look out for the assumptions in arguments for and against. Anybody has a question here? Who wants to entertain us? Mental stimulation. Go ahead. Yes.
I should have injected
Injected
a verse of
inside the nucleus or outside the nucleus?
inside the
All right,
of my discussion. Just very quickly, the Quran says that done does not avail against the truth. Right? The Quran is telling us, don't assume. I should have added that to that was what I wanted to append to it.
Allah barak fikum. Exactly.
Brother Abdullah, Sheikh Hussam, any advice for parents on how to help their kids with, keeping their deen and their aqeedah and ideologies?
I insist that I go first. Bismillah. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu salam ala rasulillah. Protecting your youth. I would say teach them how to think, not what to think. When someone comes to the masjid and says, I need to learn about Islam, what are you going to teach them? Oh, let me show you how to pray. Let me show you how to, let me tell you about the 5 pillars. Most of the times we focus on ritual, but we don't focus on what it means to know Allah, what it means to build a relationship with Allah. So I would say begin by teaching them how to make that connection with Allah deep, profound, and beautiful. Right? And I would teach them how to think, not what to think. So keeping it simple. I will begin there. And we have great examples from the Quran and Sunnah on how to do that. So root it back in the Quran and Sunnah.
Examples, or rather guidance for parents. I can only kind of give an example from my own parents, who in essence took the step of, well, there was no social media back then, it was happy days, turning off the TV and leaving me in the room with loads of books, random books. I mean, we weren't a rich family, so people threw out books. If my parents found some books that people had thrown out, they would just grab it and stuff it in my kind of shelves, and I would, out of curiosity and boredom, start reading and perusing them. We also had some neighbors who were very kind of generous, and they put me up for a subscription of National Geographic, which is kind of very general, all kinds of general knowledge, science, geography, biology, and so on and so forth. You can turn children into geniuses. Might not work so well in my case, but you can turn your children to geniuses by switching off the TV and social media. Yes, it requires more supervision and more work, because yes, social media and TV usually keeps them quiet, and games as well, but it kind of, to use a metaphor, rots brain cells, in essence. You have to make your kids read, and that knowledge benefited me enough to the point that I discovered and embraced Islam at a young age, because I had done so much reading. And one of the questions I hate, the worst question I hate, is people say, brother, what can I do to get your knowledge? And I hate it because they usually say, give me a reading list. That's what they usually say. That's the one I hate. I hate that the most. And I say, well, apart from obviously the Quran and Sunnah, which is obviously a very obvious response, read every single book you can get your hands on a whole number of different topics, anything, right? I had in my library, was it a handbook for Navy sailors on how to use radar at sea. It was very advanced stuff for a 7 and 8 year old to look at. I didn't understand it, probably still don't. But that was the kind of random stuff I was exposed to. And the human brain is amazing, and it can put all these connections together and come to some amazing, conclusions and insights. So read a lot and expose your children to lots of reading materials. Switch off the social media and the TV. It helped a lot in my case, but you should do that for your kids. They'll thank you later.
Just going to add, building on that very quickly. SubhanAllah, I remember when I was very young, we didn't have TV in the house. That came much later, not because we couldn't afford it, but because the parents wanted us to actually learn outside. So we spent most of our time running around in the farm, riding horses, actually living life, discovering, digging and going. Once I was bored, so I took my horse and I traveled for like 3-4 hours and came back. I was discovered by some Bedouins who live on the outskirts of the south. Amazing stories that you can build. When you have that life experience as a kid, it changes you. You're not just a consumer. And I remember one of the things that people used to say about me in high school. And I remember even, subhanAllah, when I first got married to my wife, she said something to me. She said, I don't like watching a show or any TV with you. And I'm like, why? Why don't you like that? She's like, you're too critical. You're going to stop every moment. You're going to say, what is the purpose of this episode? What is the director trying to show here? Who's behind? Who's pumping it? Why? What is this? I'm asking all these questions, right? So, why? Because from the very beginning, you're taught how to think. So teach your kids not just to be passive consumers of content and information, but to be critically engaged with anything that is provided by asking those difficult questions from the very beginning, by the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Barak feekum. I have my own mic now, guys. Isn't this amazing? I feel so excited.
We're in trouble.
Everybody's in trouble now. Listen, we have 5 more minutes for this specific panel. Inshallah, we're going to get another panel. So I want right now to quickly, one question from the brothers, a representative of the one, then one rep from the sisters. Who wants to go first? One question each. Who wants to do it? Who wants to do it? Who wants to do it? Go ahead, brother. Okay. Sure.
So I was thinking that, let's say I'm working mathematician, and mathematicians have like 2 different schools of thought, Platonism and we have formalism. So what about people believing in, let's say, Platonism? Does it affect your Islamic belief system? And something that's tied to it is, how does, in the Islamic perspective, we define what a belief is? I mean, is the belief same as a faith, or is it different?
Okay, you gotta get one of those. Which one do you want?
Okay, I would rather go with the first one.
The Plato one? Okay, so all right. So inshallah, who wants to take this? All right, the philosopher question. Can you quickly summarize it, inshallah? And I like the other one. We'll give the other one if you want. If Sheikh Hassan wants to take the other one, it's fine.
The brother asked a great question, which I'm going to maybe connect it to the next session, so to lay the scene for the next panelists. So he talked about how would we assess an idea like Platonism and its kind of worldview and concept of Platonic forms and idealism and things like that, which I'm not going to bore you with the kind of mechanics of that stuff. Stuff that influenced many Muslim thinkers as well and led them to many errors, unfortunately. You know what? Why does Christianity seem radically different or even very alien from Judaism and from Islam? Right? There's something, like whatever is different about Christianity to Judaism and Islam, where did that come from? Right? The idea of God incarnating into human beings, the Son of God as a literal idea, God as a Trinity, as a kind of type of composite Trinity, and the Holy Spirit that works within you and changes your personality and so on and so forth. Blood atonement. Where do all those things? Because to Jews, that's kind of very alien concept. To us, it's an alien concept. Judaism is very similar to Islam, as a fellow Semitic religion. But what is all this stuff about in Christianity which we just don't realize? Well, guess what? That was early Christians being awed at this very powerful civilization and its ideologies, which was Stoicism and Platonism. i.e. Roman Empire, and its Greco-Roman culture. All these concepts you can find in Roman culture. But why did these Christians adopt it? Or what were they trying to do? They were trying to give dawah or invite these Romans, these Gentiles, to Christianity. But the Romans like, why do we want to believe in this, this Jesus character from a backwater place of our empire? Basically, who's this guy? We have Pythagoras. We believe he's divine. He became divine. He was such an amazing man. Pythagoras, there was a cult about Pythagoras, right? Dionysus, Orpheus. These are great. These are individuals so great, they have a spark of divinity in them. They have daemon in them. Daemon means just, not demon, although it's a related word, but it just means to have a god or a type of god in it. So how did the Christians compete in their dawah? They up their game and say, oh, well, Jesus is really special. Oh, he's super special. Yeah, you could say he's kind of divine-ish. Yeah, he's the son of God in the literal sense, like you believe that son of Jupiter or sons of Zeus and so on, same kind of stuff. Right? Stoicism was the belief that you should do things out of love of mankind. That should motivate you, a greater love for mankind. Okay, Christianity's got it. We do things for love. We live by love. Our law is love. And Stoicism was about self-restraint and control over yourself. Right? And the Christian said, well, you know what? You can't achieve that unless you have the Holy Spirit inside you to make you achieve complete, perfect self-control of yourself. All the Roman virtues, Christianity was marketed to achieve, or that Christianity was the same as that. Or we were teaching, the Christian would say, we were teaching no different to what you guys believe. It was marketed, every change that happened to early Christianity, yes, it made it more easy to accept by Gentiles, but it changed Christianity so much that, as Muslims believe, a new prophet was required to rectify these changes. So if you want to say pragmatically, yes, they made changes to their own religion to make it more acceptable, but it was no longer, according to the Islamic perspective, it was no longer the teachings of Jesus. It stopped being a religion of Jesus and became a religion about Jesus. Right? Jesus was teaching, if you want forgiveness, you have to repent. There's even the whole parables in the Bible. I'm not going to go into that. I'm going to leave it for the next session. But then with Greco-Roman culture, the idea of the Mithraic cult, the idea of blood atonement for repentance and forgiveness of your sins, that they up the ante and match that. See, I see your Greco-Roman culture and I raise you. You can achieve all these virtues. So the reason why I say this is because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam warned us that we will repeat the same mistakes as our predecessors. What is currently in vogue isn't Platonism anymore, or Stoicism anymore. It's liberalism and a competing rival ideology, Marxism, and a type of a halfway form, neo-Marxism and postmodernism, the kind of stuff you get in your universities. I was going to actually have a big rant about that to the youth when someone mentioned white supremacy, structural racism, I could say that, or even social constructionism, all concepts of neo-Marxist and postmodernism, which have assumptions, and these assumptions, if you are followed consistently, negate aspects of Islam. Basically, there can't be any hierarchies, but the Quran says that Allah has made people into hierarchies so they can be service to each other. Or that's against the egalitarianism of neo-Marxist or postmodernism. There can't be hierarchies. Hierarchies is oppression. What is good are those who are being oppressed, as in they are the ones who are in the right, and those who are doing the oppressed, they're the evil. But in the Quran, it talks about the oppressors and the oppressed all going to hell because, and the oppressed saying that, oh, we wouldn't have gone to hell if it wasn't for you oppressors. And the oppressors said, no, we didn't misguide you. Right? You just in essence, you just believed our way of life, but you didn't like your position in the hierarchy. You still followed the way of life. You just had a different angle because you were in the weaker side of it. But both the oppressors and the oppressed will be punished if they rejected the truth. And the oppressors will say, look, we didn't make you reject the truth. You just got envy of us and you wanted an equal slice of the pie. But the pie was corrupt, basically, right? So that's what I'm saying. That's what I'll leave it is. Don't make the same mistake of our predecessors. And the reason why I mention that is not because there's a panel coming about that will talk about Christianity, and there are some Christian guests. And I wanted the Christian guests to understand how Islam looks at our predecessor religions, and how Judaism, a Semitic religion, and Islam are very similar, but Christianity is a bit different in some of its beliefs, but not so alien to Greco-Roman culture and philosophy. And let us remember not to repeat the mistakes of those who wanted to make Christianity more appealing to the Roman culture by us trying to make Islam more appealing to the West by liberalizing Islam and turning Islam into something that it's not.
Jazakumullah khair, Brother Abdullah.
One-
Before inshallah, I'll give the mic to Sheikh Hussam. There's a quick announcement. A white Toyota AAFS 641. The engine is on. So if you don't want the gas to run, please go ahead and turn it on. And yeah, you're hurting the environment too. Astaghfirullah al-azim. A'udhu billah. It's haram, brother. I'm just kidding. Okay, just turn off your car. Sheikh Hassan, go ahead, brother.
Fine, Bismillah. Just to go back to your point, and building on top of the point that was beautifully put, I had to excuse myself, so forgive me, just had to make a quick call and do some things. But building on top of that point, if you want to see examples in our own history of the ways that Muslim communities tried to make sense of the religion and create that syncretism between what they believed and what was culturally appropriate and acceptable at that time, you can go into the history of Muslims in China. You can look into the Han Kitab genre, which basically was an attempt to reconcile between Islam, some forms of Buddhism, some form of Confucianism. All of these attempts, subhanAllah, are actually in our own history. And you can look at the way that Muslims basically critique that and pointed, subhanAllah, to some of the fundamental intellectual failings and errors, and also some of the good things that, were assumed, or some of the intentions that were good at the very beginning. So we don't have to look far to see that happen. It's in our own history. And of course, Andalusian Muslims and Muslims that were reading, classical texts. That's not the only example. We have Muslims in China as well. So you can look into the Han Kitab genre as a great example of that.
Jazakumullah khair. Sheikh.
I promise I'll be quick.
All right.
So just quick thing on isms and Islam. My advice when I talk to students is don't look at the similarities between an ism and Islam. Look at the differences. Because it's easy now to just see a few things that, feminism is about women rights, Islam gives women rights, their Islam is feminism. Democracy is people voting for Amir, Islam has shura, Islam is democracy. Communism, back in the 60s, 70s was spreading in the Muslim world. Idea for community taking care of each other, that's Islam, right? So, watch out, look at the differences instead of the similarities.
We are only like 45 minutes late, so inshallah, jazakumullah khair.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa
Assalam wa
barakatuh.
rahmatullah.
Jazakallah khair for sharing the knowledge and your time. My question is about Islam being a boring religion. I hear a lot of youth saying everything that is fun is banned by Islam. It's wrong based on Islamic teachings. Like, for instance, music, like sketching faces, like, going out as boys and girls together. Everything that is actually allowed and made fun in a Western society is banned or wrong based on Islam. And then the community's response is, let's halalify those things. Like, for instance, if you're not supposed to go door to door on a Halloween, let's do a Halaloween, right? So a lot of parents think, like, providing an alternative solution based on Western culture and secular practices will actually make the youth understand, especially the teens understand that yes, Islam can be fun, and we can actually transform the Western society's approaches and practices and make them halalify. So what's your take? What should parents do? What should the community do instead of transforming the Western secular practices into Islam?
Barakallah feekum, jazakumullah khair. I guess everybody heard the question. Let's focus on the first part, which is this true? Like, how should we see it? Like, why our youth are seeing Islam as just bunch of lump of restrictions, a bunch of limitations. So who wants to start first, inshallah? Sheikh Hussam or Brother Abdullah? Yalla, brothers. UK first. Go ahead. You have 1 minute, 60 seconds.
Okay. It's because my head of state is the Queen. Is that why you say that? UK first. Okay, so the perception that Islam is just a list of do's and don'ts, haram and halal, and with a lot of people saying, or those who are perceived to be dawah carriers, or let's say speakers saying haram, 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 is actually perception from colonialism, when our societies were changed so much that Muslims didn't understand how to respond other than to say any change is haram, right? And they overdid it and went beyond the requirements of Islam in many matters. And so the idea of the haram police and the perception that if you're religious, you must be like miserable and serious all the time and so on and so forth. I appear serious all the time, but that's just because I'm British. But there's a perception that you can't have fun. Here's the thing is this. Have fun in the mubah. What, like you can't have barbecues or like get-togethers with the guys or the girls if you're girls. You can't do that in Islam. You can't like have discussions or play halal games or all kinds of stuff like this, or engage in like wrestling and all that kind of stuff. You can't do that stuff in Islam. No, of course you can. Of course you can do those things. So have fun in the halal. The Sahabas were very jovial characters. There was one particular Sahaba who was a bit naughty. He used to do practical jokes on all the Sahabas. He would say he would go to some guy and say, "Oh, that guy is a slave. I'll sell him to you." And then the guy would go to collect him, and the guy would go, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" It's like, "Sorry, your master just sold you to me." It's like, "No, I'm not a slave." Right? He did practical jokes. Right? Of course you can have fun. Right? Who didn't say that? But we think that fun must involve drinking alcohol or like doing Halloween and going out and having mixed, let's say, parties and things like that. Right? I think that just shows a lack of imagination more than someone who's not just someone who doesn't obey the limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's so many things you can do in the halal, which is fun. So do that. Why not?
Thank you very much. May Allah bless you, Brother Abdullah. Sheikh Hussam, 60 seconds.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu salam ala Rasulullah. Building on what our respected brother has said, subhanallah, I'll give you a story. Prophet Muhammad he gives his wife Aisha radiallahu anha a bracelet. In another narration, a necklace, a beautiful necklace. And then subhanallah, he tells her, you see this necklace? You see how it turns around forever? That is representative of my love for you. So he's basically saying the equivalent of a ring is round, it turns forever, and that's how long we'll be together, yeah? The Prophet Muhammad was expressive of his love. He raised Aisha radiallahu anha, he kissed Fatima radiallahu anha, he kissed his grandchildren Hassan and Hussein. Even subhanAllah in public, that man came and said, Ya Muhammad, I have this many kids, and I don't express. It's almost a sense of weakness to express mercy and compassion. And when our kids see absence of that in the house, absence of humor, absence of mercy, absence of compassion, and on the other side they see all this expressive and very sophisticated forms of like this and that, which are all fake in the dramas and Bollywood and Hollywood, they assume that there's this subhanAllah discrepancy between like Muslims being rigid and tough and rough and shuyukh are being all that stuff, and then of course halal all of a sudden becomes ugly and vivid and horrendous, and haram becomes beautiful and exciting and enjoyable. So I would say begin by challenging those perceptions in the house. In the house, right? Show that compassion, show that mercy, show that fun. When there was a divorce in Medina, and Aisha was very upset. She was worried about her own relationship with the Prophet. So he came and he told her, Aisha radiallahu anha, he said, Aisha, you see this bracelet? It's not going to be, our marriage is not going to be like any other marriage. Our marriage is going to be like this bracelet. It's a bond that will last forever. And he did this in a cute way. Prophet ﷺ, in the beautiful story in which Aisha placed her shoulder upon the Prophet ﷺ. Very long story, which shows that beautiful connection that they had, subhanAllah. And of course the Prophet ﷺ made jokes himself. So I would say, like just very last second, yeah? I would say, for example, the example of a little kid who came to me and said, Sheikh, I don't like Islam, I want to leave Islam. He was like 7 years old. You want to leave Islam as a 6-year-old? He's like, yes. I'm like, why? He's like, because I can't have a dog as my pet. I'm like, yeah, Habibi. He's like, Islam is so restricted because I can't have a dog as my pet. And I'm like, how many animals are out there? He's like, I don't know, lots of animals. I'm like, out of all those animals, you can have a bird, you can have a cat, you can have a chicken, you can whatever, you can have
a lion,
right? Huh?
A tiger.
A lion, a tiger. A tiger. Exactly, or. And I told him, by the way, yeah, you can have actually a hunting dog, you can have a guard dog, you can have a guide dog. There are so many, right? Or of course, you can be Maliki and take that opinion. So first of all, don't reduce the deen, number one. Don't reduce the deen. Don't reduce the deen, and don't bring culture into the deen. You know, some kids, subhanAllah, they're with their parents. A dog walks into the elevator. It's a black dog. Remember the hadith about black dog, jinn. This is jinn. All of this stuff, and having that kind of, subhanAllah, layered upon deen, and that being conflated with deen, that's where the problem is. So confusing religion with culture is an issue. Not being fun, not being humorous, not being engaging, not being just compassionate in the house sends that wrong message. طيب? Yeah.
Jazakumullah khair. May Allah bless you. So I'm just going to finalize with actually adding a third view quickly, and I'll limit myself to a minute, inshallah. So, sister, to be honest, also from my perspective, just to add to the two amazing answers that we just got, is that sometimes we have to acknowledge that, yes, certain things are actually, desirable, that are. And we need to understand that we need to teach our kids the understanding of instant gratification. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what's good for us in the long term. Yes, it could basically be true to, that eating candy is desirable and likable and is nice and it makes you happy and makes you feel good. But eating lots of candy will make your teeth go bad in the long term. So we need to explain to them this concept of instant gratification in as basic way as possible. And number two, to be honest, is when our children are too focused on dunya, we're too focused on the some of the examples you just mentioned. We have to give our children a different perspective and different vision in life. If all what they care about is basically, their own stimulus every single day, having a mission, for example, to change the world, to work with Allah, to be in Jannah, to dream about Jannah every day, to basically want to be at the top level of Jannah, without these basically, tweaks in your family affairs, things will not really change as much. Barakallahu feekum, jazakumullah khair.